Support for WUWM podcasts comes from Potawatomi Casino Hotel Milwaukee, home to 24/7 excitement, dining, and an on-site hotel at 1721 West Canal Street. More information at potawatomi.com.
You're listening to Lake Effect Spotlight from WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR station. Here's one of our favorite conversations about the people, places, and organizations that shape Milwaukee.
Data centers are the foundation of the internet, with tech companies like Microsoft investing billions of dollars in artificial intelligence. Ever larger data centers are being built and proposed around the world. In Wisconsin, projects like the Vantage data center in Port Washington have stirred a lot of controversy. And that's just one of the many proposed centers in the state. In Mount Pleasant, Microsoft is building what it calls the most advanced data center in the world. But how will these large-scale, billion-dollar projects impact Wisconsin communities? To help understand these questions, WUWM has put together a guide on our website to give you a better understanding of the issue. WUWM reporter Eddie Morales joins me now to talk about it. Eddie, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, Joy.
So let's start with probably the main question here. What are data centers?
Yeah, data centers, they really support everything that we do on the internet, things that we use our computer for, things that we do on our phone. I spoke with 3 experts to learn more about data centers. One of them is Kyle Cranmer. He is the director of the Data Science Institute at UW-Madison, and he described some of the reasons data centers exist.
They power essentially almost all internet and digital services that you ever might encounter. So, for instance, if you hear that something is in the cloud, actually it's very much on the ground and in one of these data centers. So that includes search engines like Google, your email, messaging.
So there are over 4,000 data centers in operation in the U.S. and nearly 3,000 more that have been announced or are under construction. And so they're growing at a really fast rate. And a major reason for that is advancements in cloud computing and AI, and kind of a race between tech companies in different nations to become a leader in that. To describe the way that data centers look physically, they're kind of nondescript, often large. They really have a big presence in rural areas. And specifically when it comes to the race in competing for AI advancements, the types of data centers that are needed for that are hyperscale data centers. And so those are the ones that are especially large, that house thousands of industrial scale computer servers to support that cloud and AI infrastructure. And in large part, those are controversial because they require more land and more resources to function.
Sure. Now, it seems like we have seen data centers all over the news lately. Why is that? Why are we seeing them so much?
There's an investment of billions of dollars from tech companies like Microsoft, Meta, Google, to bring these to communities that have the resources, that have the tax incentives like Wisconsin does. And so because those are appearing, those proposals, those are popping up in the news because of the concerns that they raise and some of the controversial aspects that surround it. So, for example, residents are voicing concerns at municipal meetings. Environmental groups like Clean Wisconsin are conducting studies on things like electricity and water usage. Microsoft even canceled plans for its Caledonia data center that it proposed after so many critics showed up and voiced their concerns about it. Kyle Cranmer spoke to that in our chat, and I think that really highlights some of the problems that we're seeing and why it's appearing in the news so much.
I think data centers are at the intersection of many issues that have people's attention and also includes a lot of themes that people are simultaneously excited and worried about.
Right now, Microsoft's data center in Mount Pleasant is under construction, and the company also recently announced that it would expand that project with an additional 15 data centers. So there's really not going to be any time soon where this is in the news less. It's going to be an ongoing and developing thing.
That sounds like a huge number of buildings. What is the rationale behind building so many new data centers?
Yeah, tech companies say that hyperscale data centers provide the infrastructure that they need to improve AI performance and growth. Some proponents link that growth of AI and data centers to the nation's future. Some local lawmakers in Wisconsin are eager for that development in their communities. They say that data centers can generate millions of dollars in tax revenue. Another expert that I spoke to, Costa Samaras, is the director of the Scott Institute for Energy Innovation at Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh. He also led clean energy innovation for the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy under the Biden administration. And he's not really speaking here as a supporter or a critic of data centers, but I think this quote from our conversation really puts into perspective why there's this data center boom right now.
Well, data centers are the foundation of the internet. So they are essential infrastructure like railroads or power plants or highways. And they are driving a lot of the investment in tech and energy right now. And they can help improve U.S. innovation for artificial intelligence. Advocates
of job creation, they're arguing that data centers will provide important job opportunities and job training. And that's a big part of OpenAI and Oracle's Vantage data center in Port Washington. It's called the Lighthouse Data Centers Project. And they're saying that it's going to create more than 4,000 skilled construction jobs, union jobs, and then there will also be more than 1,000 long-term jobs and then thousands of more indirect jobs. And that's according to a release from the companies.
And yet we're seeing so many communities come out against these data centers. Why are there so many Wisconsin communities that oppose data center developments?
Ultimately, critics say that development is moving too quickly and without enough oversight or public involvement. There's been concern about NDAs or non-disclosure agreements between tech companies and communities. That's actually an issue that one expert I spoke with, Amy Barrio, she mentioned that to me. She's the communications director at Clean Wisconsin, and she says those deals have caused a lack of transparency.
It's hard to overstate the concern that's out there on so many levels. Certainly having things rush through behind closed doors only makes that worse.
So there's also concern about the potential impact on climate goals, homeowners and renters' energy rates, the ways that the large presence of data centers can change the rural character of these communities. And according to a University of Michigan study, the rapidly growing energy demands of data centers have even forced states to delay the retirement of coal and gas plants and even consider building new fossil fuel facilities. So really, there's this concern about a regression from some of the work in recent decades that's gone into clean energy. Critics of the data center boom, they also worry about how residential power rates could be affected. The Lighthouse project in Port Washington, that calls for new high-power transmission lines to connect the data center complex to the power supply. Those high-power transmission lines could cover 100 miles and span even 6 counties. So it's a huge project, and it's a projected cost of up to $1.6 billion.
Right now, it feels like Wisconsin is a hotbed for data centers. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think expert opinions vary on this. Right now, Microsoft is touting that its Mount Pleasant data center will harbor the most powerful supercomputer in the world. Wisconsin is a desirable place for tech companies, and mainly that's because of the state's data centers sales and use tax exemption and water access for cooling servers. According to the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, these projects can bring programs to communities to bolster the workforce and offer high working wages and bring significant capital investment to communities. So Wisconsin communities are in some ways welcoming these data centers, and because of the resources we have, this is also a desirable place for them. And so those two things combining is why we're seeing Wisconsin sort of becoming what seems like a hotbed and a desirable destination for these data center proposals. Wisconsin actually had 47 data centers in operation as of October last year. And in comparison, Illinois had 232. And right now, actually leading the U.S. is Virginia with 663 data centers. So when you talk about Wisconsin being a hotbed, there are other states that are ahead, but a huge company like Microsoft saying that they're bringing the world's most powerful supercomputer here brings a lot of attention to our state. From my conversation with Amy Barrio, she shared her opinion on the question that you just asked, Joy.
It feels like Wisconsin is a hotbed for data centers, but it almost seems like every state is a hotbed for data centers. Like, certainly this is not a thing that's unique to Wisconsin. But I will say that since Wisconsin passed tax incentives for tech companies, that's when you started to see data centers really start coming in and getting proposed.
That tax incentive that Barrio cited, that's just one part of the evolving legislation and ongoing changes that are happening with different proposals from lawmakers as this situation evolves and people are trying to get ahead of how quickly these tech companies are attempting to build and propose these projects in Wisconsin.
Well, and that really gets to this next question, and one of the issues that you've mentioned here. People are concerned about oversight. They feel like there is very little happening. Who are the people, the organizations in Wisconsin that are overseeing or influencing data center development?
Yeah, there are elected officials, there's businesses, community-led groups that are all playing a role in approving and regulating, overseeing data center development. And there are also some that are speaking out against data centers. And we heard a little bit about Clean Wisconsin's role in doing some of these studies and research into what the data centers are claiming that the energy use is, and then what those implications are for the communities. In my conversation with Casas Samaras, he was able to put into perspective what implications these projects have in other states.
There have been challenges noted around the country, including in Tennessee, where a data center was burning fossil fuels on site to provide power and generating new emissions in communities. There have been challenges with electricity price spikes and grid capacity issues in different parts of the country. There are several states where data centers now consume more than 10% of the state's electricity. In Virginia, data centers consume upwards of 25 to 40% of the state's electricity.
So in Virginia, data centers consume upwards of 25 to 40% of the state's electricity. And following the rising number of data center proposals in 2025 and the rising outcry from critics, Wisconsin legislators have released several proposals. So there's a Republican proposed bill that would require the Public Service Commission to ensure that no other customers are responsible for the cost of constructing or extending electric infrastructure that primarily serves a data center. That measure, it also would require that water used to cool equipment be contained in a closed-loop system. The closed-loop system, it's this technology that data centers, especially the one in Mountain Pleasant for Microsoft, they're really emphasizing that this is going to limit the amount of water usage, and it's going to be a fixed volume of water that is recycled, only used for cooling on some of the hottest days. Other days, cooler days, they will use air with large fans to cool those servers to make sure that they don't overheat. So the renewable energy facilities that primarily serve the data centers, they would be required to be located under this proposed bill at the site of the data center. And really, Republicans backing the bill say that that's meant to minimize the strain on the statewide grid and to lower costs. In December last year, Democrats in the Senate introduced a bill that would require large-scale data centers to derive at least 70% of their annual electric energy from renewable sources. And that's in order to qualify for exemptions from sales and use taxes. So in addition to that, in order to receive tax credits, large-scale data centers would have to pay laborers and mechanics who construct or refurbish the facilities the prevailing wage or the wage under the collective bargaining agreement, so whichever is higher. These things are being put in place and proposed to just help hold these tech companies accountable so that they're not coming to the community making these promises, and then once things are done, it's not what these communities expected. You also have these community-led groups and these organizations that are also worried about the integrity of the community's rural character and energy use.
I think when we look at really anything in the tech sphere, there's always another potential problem, the long-term viability. It feels like tech moves at a pace, especially now, that it's hard to imagine that something you're building today will even be useful in 5 years. Are there concerns about these centers becoming obsolete in the relatively near future?
Yeah, there are some concerns about that, and opinions vary on it as well. Hyperscale data centers, they power artificial intelligence, right? So some critics are concerned about how quickly tech companies are building these projects and whether this growing AI bubble will pop. Amy Berrio, she shared her opinion about what some of those concerns are about this rapidly growing technology and some of the implications of if that just goes away.
We all know technology changes quickly and things become obsolete really fast. And so what happens when these hyperscale data centers aren't needed anymore, when they're obsolete? Because these are very specialized buildings.
When I spoke to Kyle Cranmer, he said that data centers likely won't become obsolete, but that they could evolve.
If the data centers only served AI and you're worried about an AI bubble, then that I think the worry that the data centers might become obsolete is much higher. But the data centers are very multi-purpose, and they're serving up all sorts of aspects of our digital lives.
Ultimately, there are a lot of advancements happening right now. There are a lot of changes and updates in proposed bills, proposed developments, studies on energy consumptions. These things are constantly changing. And so with our FAQ on our website, that's something that we'll be updating and also just individually reporting on some of these developments as they happen, especially from our environmental reporter, Susan Bentz. And we also want to know what questions listeners have, and those questions could be submitted on this FAQ page on our website.
Perfect. All right, well, a lot to look forward to. Eddie, thank you so much for being here on Lake Effect and sharing your work.
Thank you.
Eddie Morales is a WUWM news reporter who's been covering the recent influx in data centers here in Wisconsin.
Lake Effect is a daily talk show on WUWM, Milwaukee's local NPR station. It's a show where we share the stories about the people, places, and organizations that shape the city. If you enjoyed this episode of Lake Effect Spotlight, subscribe to the podcast. You can find all of Lake Effect's conversations at wuwm.com/Lake Effect, and we're on the radio Monday through Friday at noon on 89.7.
This is Tanya Mosley, co-host of Fresh Air. You'll see your favorite actors, directors, and comedians on late-night TV shows or YouTube. But what you get with Fresh Air is a deep dive. Spend some quality time with people like Billie Eilish, Questlove, Ariana Grande, Stephen Colbert, and so many more. We ask questions you won't hear asked anywhere else. Listen to the Fresh Air podcast from NPR and WHYY.